Good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, the 30th of April, and we are live here from Cranley School in Abu Dhabi. You join us this week as we celebrate Respect Week, and we will be talking today around issues around that, particularly with a focus on anti-bullying. Now, it seems like a long time since I was live on here. We've been very busy since then. We've had a lot of community events taking place in school. Just want to say a few thank yous. In the background, we've got one of our parents from the CCC, Rima, and just want to say a huge thank you to all of our parent community, every parent who contributed to our iftar that took place towards the end of Ramadan. When we then had a lovely 3 weeks off, we then also came back to some not very good weather, which we managed to all get through as a community. I know there was lots of disruption. I hope all your homes were okay. I know everyone was safe in Abu Dhabi, which is huge. But it was the worst weather that we've had in 75 years. So we did have school closed for 4 days. Following on from that, we've had some Make-A-Wish events taking place last week. And again, huge thank you to everybody who contributed and to the parents who supported our student-led events. It's still ongoing this week in pre-prep that we are raising money for Make-A-Wish. So if you would like to donate, please do so, and we will share with you our total as we count all the money, or as Make-A-Wish do. So as you will see when George does his presentation, we are looking at respect in school this week. And so this talk really is around what we can do as parents to help support our children. When George and I were speaking, we realised that a lot of what he talks about in terms of mental health also hugely applies to bullying prevention as well. And so this talk is going to touch on issues such as boundaries, confidence, building self-esteem, and all of the things that we feel are really important when it comes to bully-proofing our children. The resources that we put out onto the parent newsletter also are there to help you. And we fully understand, as a parent, it is every parent's nightmare to have your child come home and say that they are being bullied, whether that's online or whether that's face-to-face. So today we're going to be joined by George Peterkin. He's worked with us at Cranley for over 4 years now. He does mental health first aid training with our staff, with our students. He's also done suicide first aid training with our staff. He looks at eating disorder awareness, as well as wellbeing warrior courses with our students. He recently came in to train all of our year 8, looking at their own mental health and well-being as well. He's also recently started offering counselling skills courses here live, face-to-face in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai. We have members of our parent community who have taken part in those courses. And I'm sure George is going to talk to you about all the things that he can offer. And of course, do reach out to him if any of those things are of interest to you as a parent as well. We need to be ready to support our children. And I think that's what today is all about, being ready to know what to do, what to say, how to react. And that actually applies if your child says they are being bullied, but also if we find out that our children are displaying bullying behaviour. Because as I said in the parent newsletter, every child that is displaying bullying behaviour is also someone's child. So we also need to think about how we react in that way as well. So I don't want to talk for too long today. George has got a lot to say, and we have already had a number of questions come in from our parent community. My email is there. If you have a question that you would like to ask anonymously, please do so, and we can go through that. If you would like to add a comment in as the talk is taking place, we are live on Facebook and we are live on YouTube. And of course, some of you will be watching this asynchronously. If you do have any questions, if you do need any support, please do reach out. We now have 2 counsellors here at Cranley Abu Dhabi. Obviously, Miss Tori, who's been with us for 3 years, and we also welcome Miss Maria as well in January. So we're really excited to have that extra support to support you and to support your children. So without further ado, I am going to welcome George into the call. He is live from the UK. Hi, George, are you there?
Morning. Yeah, morning, Mrs. Hewitt. Morning, everyone.
You can call me Liz, don't worry.
Yeah.
So we do have parents live online right now, and I am going to hand over to you. But I know one of the things that we've been talking about is Respect Week, because Respect Week for me has got an anti-bullying focus, but we didn't want to call it anti-bullying week because we want the value of the month, respect, to permeate our whole ethos here at Abu Dhabi. And I know you're going to show one of the slides in your presentation that shows what we kind of feel about Respect Week. I just want to say how that came about. Obviously, George and I talk a lot about what we need to do to help our children thrive. And one of the things I looked at was every anti-bullying week that had ever taken place in the UK. And the themes of our Respect Week, they mirror those. So things like being an upstander, not a bystander, developing empathy, looking at difference and diversity. They are all themes that have happened in anti-bullying weeks, and they are all themes that our students will be looking at this year. And as we then obviously carry this on in future years as well. So we've developed a sort of spiral curriculum. So please do talk to your children at home about what they've been learning about, what they've been discussing, and obviously also some of the things that you are going to talk about today, George. Have you got anything else you'd like to add to that before I pop out of the call?
No, I think I should just get going, really.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to leave the call. I'm just going to add your PowerPoint in. If you could just share that, George, so that they can see.
Yeah, I've just pressed share, so hopefully that's showing.
And if you could play it, I think it would look better as well. Is it that little button there with the... It's disappeared. Try again.
I've pressed slide share, as it were.
And it's disappeared out of the call. Could you just pop it back in again? It didn't work. We like a few technical issues, don't we? We were just talking about this before.
Okay, shared screen and into presentation.
Excellent. And then if you just click the little button so we don't see the whole thing, we just see the slide.
Yeah, which I've done or should have done.
Not working, doesn't matter. We'll move like this. Right, I'm going to pop out the call and hand over to you, and I'll join back in at the end where we'll take questions from parents. Thanks, George.
Okay, well, apologies for that, everyone. Literally on my screen right now, it's exploded. It's covering all of it. I will say for Mrs. Hewitt and for everyone, I'm happy to send these slides over anyway. So I do apologise for that. I really like this acronym. Actually, obviously I'm a big Aretha Franklin fan anyway, but and whatnot. But respect, I think this it's a really powerful expression, and I think it's really important for all of us to be mindful of. We have to be the example to our children and young people in our families, in our community, at the school. I don't know about you lot, but when I was raised as a teacher, the teachers was very much do as I say, not as I do. And actually what we know as a society is actually we have to be the example. I just want to have a bit of a reminder for today is that, you know, I'm speaking both as someone who was in education for many years and then also who's now retrained as a counsellor. So I do tackle this from both ends. As Liz said, you know, I do primarily work with eating disorders as a counsellor. But it's really interesting that, yes, this is, and Liz said, we're not going to call this anti-bullying week or anti-bullying workshop, because if we're going to talk about bullying, we're naturally going to have to talk about other things. I'm a big believer of prevention. Prevention is the best cure. When I work with clients with an eating disorder, my mindset is that I don't want to work with them. I don't want them to come and see me every week. I want them to be in such a good place that they never had it in the first place. Just a quick little thing, though, for today. I want you to look after yourselves. I'm mindful that I'm just speaking to a screen. I can't gauge the response. I can't gauge the reception of the material. I spoke about this with Liz yesterday. I may say some things which are a bit antagonistic, and I don't do that with intention, but they may be antagonistic. They may be upsetting for you to hear. And I will just gently encourage this from you. If you become angry or upset or a bit defensive around some of the things that are said today, own it, explore it, be curious about why it's impacting you this way, because we're all human. As parents, we're going to get things wrong. We're going to get things right. For me as a counsellor, I like the Winnicott theory. It's called the good enough mum, though I prefer to expand it to the good enough parent. We're going to get things wrong in life, guys, and that's more than okay. Let's just make sure we get more things right. I wanted to quickly gauge this though about bullying. You know, I noticed Liz's language there. There are children who are bullied, and then there are children that present bullying behaviours. I really dislike the term "they are a bully." And this is definitely me bringing in the teacher and the counsellor. We're very quick to label people as bullies, just like we're very quick to label people as being bullied. And this may be the first controversial thing for today. Sometimes when a child is being teased, however unkind it is, however poor behaviour that is, and also I'll say even as unacceptable as it can be, there's a big difference between teasing or laughing at someone as a one-off and then it being considered bullying. And I will just share this, very much a stereotype for me. Grown up in a male-dominated sport environment, we would use the word banter. Now, don't get me wrong, certain language around the expense of women was unacceptable. Homophobic language, racism, things like that. That's not banter, that's bullying, that's racism, that's whatever, it's sexism, whatever it is. But we naturally grow up in a society where people do laugh at each other's expense. We do have a joke with each other. When does it go too far and become bullying is when both people in that conversation don't have appropriate boundaries. And we'll talk about that later. But we're all on this continuum. For our children, they're more than likely going to be on the right-hand side, guys. Excellent well-being, low well-being, and then we take it from there. Liz, you may want to let me know because I'm pressing the next slide and I'm not sure if it's moving over or not.
It doesn't appear to be. We can still see the respect slide.
Okay.
Let's try again.
No, Mrs. Hewitt, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk and then I'm going to share some slot and I don't know what's going on here.
That's fine. Let's share it in the newsletter on Friday, George.
That's fine. We are naturally, guys, moving up and down in when it comes to our mental health. Happens all of the time. Okay, all of the time. Let's see if that's better. Let's see if that works. But actually, when we think about our risk factors, you know, our children are always moving to a low level of well-being all the time, a low level of well-being, up and down throughout the day. There you go. That looks a bit better. Apologies for that, everyone. We are naturally moving on this right-hand side. Low level of well-being, excellent well-being, up and down throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the months, the years. Think about when that storm hit. For some of us, it was definitely a low level of well-being. Does that mean we have depression? Probably not. We're just having a low moment. And our children, when they experience bullying behaviours, they're going to dip into that bottom right. And it's our role as adults, as parents, as teachers, to move them back up. Now, what are our potential risk factors for our children and young people that cause their well-being to take a hit all of the time? Well, there's a large list. There's things like discrimination, exams, work pressures, abuse, or loads of different things, the future of the world. And then, goodness me, I have lots of young clients that talk to me and they talk about the future of the world because they think when they're in adulthood, it's going to hell. And one of them once said to me, "It's not like you've got anything to worry about, George." And it was my response of, "How old do you think I am?" As if I can't be impacted by this. But these young people have got a lot of pressures. But the big ones, the biggest risk factors for our kids, and I reckon all of you right now will be thinking, I know the first one. And the first one is social media. It's use of technology. Stress, nutrition, sleep deprivation, first form of torture, as we all know, poor physical health. We've then got three underlying, because these are the things I naturally want us to discuss and reflect on today and be curious about. Self-esteem and resilience, boundaries, bullying, and then role models, parenting environment. I've underlined those three. The one which is, I feel, the most important, and particularly what we see with eating disorders, with children with high anxiety levels, is self-esteem and resilience. Self-esteem and resilience are huge preventative factors, not just for the child who's experiencing bullying behaviors, but also for the child expressing or portraying bullying behaviors, but also for us as the parents. Okay, remember, we have to be the model for the child who is experiencing these issues. Please don't tick all of these off and think, oh, my child's going through all of these. Oh, they're going to be exposed to everything. The word is potential. I'm going to gently say this and just leave it in the ether there. Our children actually have to go through most of these, because how else can they thrive when they leave our schools, go to uni, start their jobs? How else can they thrive if they're not exposed to things in small dosages? For example, how is a child going to thrive if they're not told no a bit growing up? How's a child going to thrive if they get things wrong on social media and learn how to use it appropriately? These things always come along because they're lessons. Now, if those of you who might be attending because you've done mental health first aid, apologies, you recognise this. But I wonder if I said to you right now, okay, everyone, let's look at the negative column. I want you to use as many negative adjectives that you could use to describe poor mental health. What words would come up for you? What about that child who has come to us in tears about receiving bullying behaviours? What sort of negative adjectives might we use to describe them? What things might we say in response to someone who's having a distressing experience? What sort of things might we be saying that would have a negative impact on that person struggling? What things might we say which are well-intentioned but actually have a negative impact? Now, this won't surprise you, everyone, but when I did the Warrior course with the Year 8s, we do this activity and the kids love it because they can think of all the negative adjectives. When I do it with adults, the third bullet point is the one we really struggle with as adults, because our perspective, our boundaries have already been put in place. Our relationships with children are very different. We really struggle to consider what might have a negative impact on our children while saying it with well intention, from a good place. Children, when I do the course, the Year 8s, they thrashed that third bullet point. And then when I shared some answers, they groaned in agreement. And oh gosh, I hear that all the time, George. I wonder how much easier it would be for you to think of positive expressions and adjectives to say to our child when they're struggling, when they've come to us to share a bullying experience, even when they've just come to share their distress about something. Statistically, were we to do this as an exercise, you would find the negatives a lot easier to come up with. That's not because we're horrible people. I promise you that. We're not horrible. But the reason why we find it really hard when it comes to coming up with positive answers and expressions and finding what some of you might say the right thing to say in this situation is that we begin to overanalyze. We worry. We worry, will I make things worse for my child if I respond this way or that way? I'm going to quickly sidetrack with an answer. What do our children need primarily? They need us to be present. That's what they need. Sometimes words aren't always needed. It's our presence, our undivided attention. That's what children truly need from us, first and foremost. But let's look at negatives. I don't know about you, mad, weak, crazy. With bullying, and I see this a lot. I worked in all boys schools growing up, so we've got to think about that gender kind of demographic here. What are boys told if they get upset about someone bullying them or being unkind to them? You've got to man up. Don't be a girl. Roll your sleeves up. Just a bit of banter. Things like that, which just completely downplay what's been going on for them. The ones on the right are ones which children tell us their parents say to them all the time, which are well-intentioned, but are actually having a negative impact. It will be fine. Don't worry. Don't cry. Don't be angry. This is what I did, ... At least ... What were we all told growing up? I don't like my food. There's starving children in the world. That's what I was told growing up. If I had a bad leg, if I got a bruised leg, it might well be say, oh, I've got a bad leg. And someone would say, well, at least you got another one. We kind of downplayed the experience for them and tried to say, well, you know, there's worse people off. As I said, look at that last bullet point. Or how about, I know exactly how you feel. I wanted to quickly go to that, don't worry, don't cry, don't be angry. When we say don't, if we tell someone to not worry, to not cry, to not be angry, what are we telling them? We're commanding them to not have emotions. And then what does a child or young person do with those emotions? They push them down. And then what do they do with those emotions when they get older? They project them in an aggressive way and an unhealthy way. In fact, they may then start to present bullying behaviors themselves. Behavior is an outlay of emotion. Behavior is an expression of how you're feeling. Those who bully are often bullied themselves. Those who bully have so much difficulties and distress in their lives that this is an expression. I'm not defending the bullying behaviors because that is unacceptable, but we always need to dig deeper. Behavior is an expression of these emotions. Children are often told to don't cry and don't be angry. And that's a real concern for me, because if we suppress these emotions for too long, they come out in really unhealthy behaviors. For us as parents, this is what I did. This is what you need to do. No, there's a time and a place for that fix it mode, because as parents, we have to fix a lot. But when it comes to a lot of dialogue, when it comes to our child receiving unkind behavior, I know this can be really difficult, guys. And this is one of those times you might find it to be a bit contentious. We can't straight away go into the fix it mode, go knocking on the door at Cranley, you need to sort this out. We need to educate. We need to work with our children through this. And a big way that we can work through this as parents is, rather than fix this situation, we can work on the emotional experience of the experience first and foremost, because we want our children to be emotionally intelligent. Now let's think of positives. What positive words come to mind? Well, for me, or positive expressions, it's really hard to think of positive adjectives when someone has gone through a distressing situation. But I would say things like, you've been really brave, you've been really, really courageous to come forward. Well done and thank you. What do you need from me? How can I help you with this? The ones on the right are really good expressions. I'm really glad you told me. That's really empowering for a child or young person, even in the midst of all of their pain. I'm really glad you told me this, son. Thank you. I can see it hasn't been easy. And then these two, no wonder, and it's understandable. Anger is not a negative emotion, guys. Can I just say that? Anger is a beautiful emotion. I love it when one of my young clients gets really angry in a session, not because I'm egging them on, but because anger is a natural response to the situation they're in. And I want them to share and show that anger with me healthily. So rather than me saying, yeah, you should be angry, it's me maybe saying something like, well, it's understandable why you're really cross at the moment in this situation. And then lastly, and Liz made this point, the child that's portraying the bullying behaviors is someone's child. And I know it's really hard for us to hear this this next point, because our children are the most important child for us. I couldn't agree more. But let's separate actions and behaviors from this person. This is somebody's child. Liz and I spoke about this yesterday. I would be mortified if any child of mine was shown bullying behavior. In fact, even now, I'm getting quite cross in my head, even considering that, because it's not always a reflection of parenting. But as a parent, we take on the sins of our children, don't we? Excuse the expression. But let's separate actions and behaviors from people. And this is I always laugh about this, because one of my ex-students I taught many, many years ago is now, in fact, a teacher. And he gave me the worst time in the world in my first year as a teacher. But there's no such thing as a naughty child. It's just a child who does naughty things. Though I roll my eyes a little bit at that, having thought of my own experiences. But it is true deep down. We separate actions and behaviors. Now, what has this got to do with bullying? Well, it's to do with stigma. We find negatives to be so much easier. We have such a negativity around the poor behavior of others. We very rarely look below the surface here and think, okay, why are they doing this? What's the behaviors going on? Because if we continue to treat children who portray bullying behaviors as a poor person, poorly behaved as the bully, it builds up this self-stigma. It almost builds up a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because actually, and I know Liz and any teacher would attest to this, these situations where a child has been unkind to another, it can be dealt with really quickly. And what happens? Both children become healthier. And more often than not, they become really good friends. They're just going through a phase of social, awareness, social growth, going through adolescence. We can very quickly stop this and prevent it from going on further if we deal with it quickly. And we don't treat the person portraying with bullying behaviors as a villain. We try to work through that first and give them that opportunity for growth. But self-stigma, this is where people with mental health problems believe what is being said about their condition and agree with their viewpoints. But we could take away mental health problems to bullying behaviors, for example, or to our children experiencing the bullying behaviors. They start to agree that they have a victim mentality, or what I'm going to call in a moment the locus of control or evaluation. One of our greatest issues with self-stigma is that in the young, it leads to a lifelong reduction in our self-esteem. If we have low self-esteem, we never fulfill our potential. I don't know about you lot, but some of the people I know in my life that are the most successful are not the most talented. It's because they've got the highest forms of resilience, the highest forms of self-esteem, and they just go for it all the time. They learn from failures. They keep trying. Okay, resilience is not just about this whole idea of taking hits and keep going. Resilience is even taking responsibility for our behaviors, taking on the lessons that people are giving us. Low mental resilience, as we know, is linked to poor physical and mental health, reduced economic prospects, and just higher level of criminal behavior, or for what we will say here, continued poor behavior. You know, every child who hurts is hurt themselves. Hurt people, as they once said on a comedy show. But this is now linked to our locus of control. We've got to think about our children, how they can manage these interactions where someone is showing bullying behaviors. What's our locus of control? There's two versions. There's our internal and external. Now, as a ex-Latin teacher, I do like this because internal and locus are both very good Latin words. This whole idea of an external locus of control is that things happen to us, that victim mentality, no growth mindset. Things like, why is this always happening to me? Oh, what's the point? Why bother? There's nothing I can do about this. An internal locus is that we make things happen. We look at the things within our control. Look what I can do. I can determine my future. I can make things happen. If a child is experiencing bullying behaviors, an internal locus of control will be this mindset of, I can't really stop this child from giving these bullying behaviors to me up to a point. So I'm going to look at what I can control. I'm going to look at my own emotions. I'm going to look at what I can be doing to remove myself from those situations if needs be. I know some of us might be thinking, well, that's not fair, George, because the child who's bullying is getting away with it. No, they're still going to get intervention and support to stop this from happening. But remember, there's two sides to these stories, to these experiences. An internal locus is looking at what I can be doing. And hopefully this won't surprise you when I say this can be easily taught. No one is truly born this way. That whole nature and nurture idea. Some people I went to school with were incredibly resilient, had high levels of internal locus of control. They weren't sat down by their parents and said, this is an internal locus of control. They grew up in it. They grew up with that experience. So we have the internal locus of control, which is the whole idea about inner agency. But evaluation and internal locus of evaluation is really important, guys, when it comes to, for example, bullying. An internal and external locus of evaluation, we have both of them within our lives. An external locus is how much we need to be valued by others. So often, not often, in some cases, a child who's experiencing bullying behaviours, I'm not saying has asked for it, that's the wrong way to put it, but they put themselves in the situation. So, for example, we sometimes see a child who's so desperate to be friends or be part of this social friendship group that they'll continue to put themselves in harm's way, as it were, to be picked on, because they think even being picked on is a sign of love, of acceptance, of being part of that social group. They place their value on others. An internal locus has this idea, excuse me, I value myself. I know what I want, what I need, and what I really and that I really believe it. That is not selfish. Sometimes when I work with young people, they do say, "Oh, but I'm not a selfish person." And I ask them that question: what makes it selfish to put boundaries up for your own needs? And that's part of the dialogue. Is it any wonder? Is it any wonder that the external locus is massive amongst the young community right now? Rhetorical question here. Why do we think the external locus of evaluation is massive amongst this young community? Good old social media. What do we all crave? We crave that dopamine rush, that likes, the views, the sharing of what we post online. And children are raised on it. How many of us get even a little dopamine rush as adults when our phone beeps? Oh, who's that messaging me? Oh, I've got an email. Oh, someone's liked my post on LinkedIn. We all have these little rushes, but children are raised on this. So their external locus is massive. Okay, it's massive. And so I often ask my young, my children and young people clients, what value do you place on yourself? And what characteristics are you proud about? And when they do give me answers, they always tend to be about characteristics which positively impact others. They don't place any value on what they can offer themselves. So, how are these actually presented in children, young people, and adults? Because, guys, this is a really, really important thing in all of this. We are still learning. I know there's loads of books out there on parenting, and there's some great books, don't get me wrong, but there's no manual when it comes to us being parents. And this is quite a poignant sidetrack for me. I think, I don't know about you lot, it really aged me once I realized that my parents were human. I know that sounds a bit odd, but, in adulthood a few years ago, I realized, with a bit more of a mature mindset, reflecting on our childhood growing up. And then I just realized, what, my parents, I'm the same age as my father when my eldest sister was born. And I try to think about that and think, oh gosh, my parents did the best job that they could do. But I want you to think on this, another sidetrack. What's your own relationship with bullying? Because again, Liz and I spoke about this yesterday. We've all got our own experiences of bullying. Were we bullied growing up? And so does that impact the way that we want to support our children and young people? Perhaps, guys, we were the bully. I certainly teased people growing up. And you know what? 3 years ago, I bumped into someone and I sent them a message and asked for coffee. And I said, look, in year 9, we were all making fun of each other and I didn't really like it. And I'm really sorry if I made you feel upset. And he turned around and said, well, I'm sorry if I made you feel upset. As adults, we have a different mindset and approach to this. But we need to reflect on our own relationship with bullying. Are we projecting our own difficulties in childhood and as a young person when it comes to supporting our own children and young people in our lives? Maybe we need to work through it as well. So how do we notice that children have low self-esteem, external locus of evaluation, external locus of control? You might be thinking, George, what's this got to do with bullying? Well, we all know for the most part the signs and symptoms of a child being bullied. If a child has an external locus of evaluation or control, they're unable to handle the teasing when it happens. They're unable to handle that distress, those unkind words. And so what they might have a hesitancy and they seek lots of reassurance. I know Liz is going to mention the book and I can't remember it now. blooming ordered it a week ago. It's about this anxious generation we're living in. I will gently say one of the reasons why anxiety levels are a little high amongst this young community is nutrition as well. Nutrition has a part to play. But, children are always on their phones, screen time. It has a reduced sleep benefits as well. We know this. It all builds up to having higher anxiety levels. But hesitancy, seeking reassurance, waiting for others to almost tell us how we need to react in a situation or what we need to do. Now, don't get me wrong, everyone. When you've got a 5-year-old and you're in a public setting and something happens in front of them, they naturally look to us, don't they, to see our reaction, to gauge how do we behave in this situation. That's not a problem. But in some situations, when we pick up our children from school, when we drop them off and we're having those conversations, which are always great time to talk to our kids and to go through things is during the car drives. Always a great thing. We have to gauge when we actually tell them how we need to react or what we need to do. And sometimes we just allow them to work things out. They might wait for and allow other people to define what is right for us. That's that external locus. We've always done it this way. Why? That's why I ask people. Why have you always done it this way? Requiring or responding only to external validation. Liz said that, I work with eating disorders. We did an eating disorder course for staff. And I'm back in Dubai and Abu Dhabi middle of May, and I'm actually running a body image and self-esteem workshop for a school in Abu Dhabi for the day with the year 8s. And it's really interesting because we're going to talk about different body types and and attractiveness and body image and self-esteem. And hey, it's nice for us to have external validation when we look nice. We go on a night out, and I'd say to my ex, "You look lovely tonight, dear." Things like this. We like that. But we're more than just the external. I want people to value me, not for the way that I look, but for the way that I make them feel, for my characteristics, for my own validation. I really, something I set high value in is that I'm willing and able, and I give plenty of time to others, and I work hard. That's an internal locus there. These are the things which I know I value about myself. And if other people value it, great. But I don't really need their validation. How about having an increasing sense of responsibility for other people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors at the expense of our own? I will gently say this, guys, to all of us here. We do often deprive our own needs for the benefit of others. Why? Because we're parents. Of course, we sacrifice everything for our kids, wouldn't we? We would do anything for them. Would we do anything for them when it comes to actually sometimes putting our own needs first? Because that's actually a good lesson for our children. How about attributing good things in our life to outside factors rather than accepting good things have happened because of what we did? I love this expression. Luck is preparation meeting opportunity. Luck is preparation meeting opportunity. I remember when I was a teacher and the kids took their exams and they came out, and one of them said, it was a Latin teacher, said, "Oh, it was so lucky, sir, that they asked about Heracles and 12 labours." And I said, "What's luck? What's luck got to do with it?" I sound like Tina Turner, different change, but anyway. I said, "What's luck got to do with it?" I said, "You've worked hard, you've studied Heracles and the 12 labours, and it just happened to be in the exam, and you've thrashed the exam. Luck had nothing to do with it." And they took a pause then because they realised, actually, yeah, I did work hard. That wasn't me praising them, which fuels their external locus of evaluation. It was me simply pointing out the facts, and they came to the conclusion of, I did this, I worked hard. So what are we going to do here? How are we going to actually encourage and promote an internal locus, which will then be a preventative measure for bullying when this bullying happens? I will just gently say this, guys. We must still do the things we always do. We talk to Cranley, and I'm sure if there's any questions that will come up, that generic stuff, which we all know we already do anyway for bullying. I just want you to think outside the box a bit here. But how do we promote? Well, we encourage responsibility for everyday tasks. We set tasks. We ask if they've got any questions. We trust in their ability to complete them. I'm going to add one. How about we encourage responsibility for when they get things wrong? Our children will get things wrong all day, all night, because we do as adults. Our children will get things wrong at Cranley. It is, and more often than not, I promise you guys, it's not a reflection of your parenting. I'm a big sports fan, massive sports fan, and I remember once Pep Guardiola got interviewed because he dropped a player, and he got interviewed before, and they said, "You've dropped this Fernandinho. Is it because he had a poor game and he made a few mistakes in the weekend?" And Pep Guardiola, most successful manager in today's current age, he looked at the interview like he was a stupid idiot, and he said, "What are you talking about? It's all about making mistakes." And he said, "Mistakes is part of the game. It's what we do after a mistake." And that was beautiful. It's all about making mistakes, and let's make our children take responsibility now and then when they make that mistake, because it builds resilience. Provide opportunities for success, praise appropriately, but also specifically. Don't get me wrong, as parents, we're going to praise our children all the time. Absolutely. But maybe just insert this technique now and then. Praise appropriately and specifically. Focus on effort, not results. We all know this deep down. I've just spoken about luck. If you want luck, go buy a lottery ticket. Everything is down to hard work and effort. It's so rare that people achieve what they achieve if they aren't hardworking, if they don't have that effort. Help them reflect on their feelings when they've achieved things through their efforts. So even if the result doesn't go that way, we might say, and this is reflecting on our use of language, saying "I'm really proud of you" is amazing, particularly as a parent. But maybe sometimes we might want to say to them, "I think that's something you could be really proud of, that you worked your socks off today." They go sign up for sports day. Okay, they finish last. They're not great at the 1500 meters. So I'm reflecting here because I had to sign up for it to represent my house at school. But I remember I worked really hard for 6 weeks. I finished third last or something. And I remember my dad saying, he said, it didn't matter about the results, of the fact that you worked really hard for those 6 weeks and you gave it your all. It's these lessons, those time and places for this. Because what did it do? It boosted my locus, my internal locus. And naturally, what did some people want to do the next day? They wanted to make fun of me for finishing near the end. Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less, because I knew deep down that I put value on what I had done. And this now goes to boundaries. Setting boundaries is really important. Many children that portray bullying behaviours will soon stop them when the other person shows that they won't accept the behaviour. We all know this. If we show that we're hurt, they'll keep going and doing it. We know that in part. This is linked to it. But if we have a strong internal locus of evaluation, strong locus of control, and we set boundaries as a child or young person to say, this is unacceptable, I won't allow this anymore, that other person will soon back down. So how do we actually set boundaries, though? Because this is a really big thing for us as parents. The do as I say, not as I do doesn't really work as much as it used to 30 years ago. We have to be an example for our children. My father, I know it's a bit of a sidetrack here, and some of you will be thinking, good. My father, and I mean this, in 30 odd years, I've never seen him speak poorly or rudely in front of a lady. Some people might think, oh, that's a bit old fashioned, George. Come on, equality. But actually, my father never did that. And my father never had to have a conversation about that concept with me either, because I grew up with two older sisters. We grew up in a female-dominated environment. And that is something I take real pride in. My father set a boundary. This is how we behave. And I naturally mirror that. I know Liz might be saying, well, Georgie, you can be a bit jokey with me, but we understand the concept here. We set these boundaries, but we have to reflect on our current relationship with the person in need. And this may be upsetting. I'm going to say two things which are quite upsetting here. Your child is not your friend. Your child is not your friend, nor are you their friend. You're their parent. And the reason why I say it so bluntly is because in friendships, our boundaries are really different. One of my closest friends, David, sent me a message this morning. I haven't responded yet. Left him on red because I've got to do this course. Naturally, I will talk a bit differently with him. Why? Because he's my best friend, one of my closest friends. As a parent, when I'm with my nieces, for example, as an uncle, my relationship with them, I'm not their friend, I'm their uncle. And that straight away changes the boundaries. And the other thing is this about boundaries and about this person in need. I hope you all love your children unconditionally. I know you do because you're on this course, but every time I go to Cranley and I meet parents, you're gorgeous. You love your kids unconditionally. But that doesn't mean that we need to like the behaviors that they carry out all the time. It's okay to dislike what our children do now and then, because actually, if we show that we really dislike what they've done, child sometimes takes that on board. It's really powerful. But how do we set these boundaries? Well, you back up boundary setting with action. You do this all the time as parents. You give them rules. We be direct, we be firm, we be gracious. How about when someone steps over one of our boundaries in a public setting, social setting in front of our children? What do? We back it up with action and we're direct, firm, and gracious. I don't appreciate you talking to me that way in front of my son. How about that? That's firm, that's direct, that's gracious. We don't debate, defend, or over explain. We do that as parents, don't we? Because I said so. But we understand the concept here. We have support easily available. Cranley's got a great form of support. But I will say this, guys, we can't just expect Cranley or any school to fix this. You know, there's only so much a school can do. It's about actually your child's here for 8 hours a day, roughly, 16 hours there with you. You know, there's work on both sides here. And stay strong and don't give in. It's really important because we start to portray these boundaries for ourselves, this internal locus of control, resilience, good self-esteem, not responding, not joining in with bullying behaviors when people are teasing others. What does that all do? If we start with ourselves as parents, our children start to mirror it. As I said with my father, some of the teachers I was taught by growing up, when I was a teacher, I naturally started to mirror their mannerisms without realization. If we become the example, our children start to mirror this. And this is in line with something called the core conditions. The last thing, very briefly, Liz, just give me 2 minutes for this, in terms of how we actually listen to our children. Okay. And these core conditions, person-centered. Liz mentioned the counselling skills training. This is the focus on it. We want to portray these core conditions of congruence and empathy and unconditional positive regard. But because we're parents, we have to take this not with a pinch of salt, but balance it with our role as the parent. Okay. We want to be real and authentic and genuine. That is such a simplification of congruence, by the way. Anyone who's done psychology, please forgive me. It's just I need to oversimplify it for time's sake. We need to have empathy, though Liz and I spoke about this yesterday. When we're a parent, our go-to tool is sympathy. Why? Because it's our baby. We gave birth to them. We've changed their nappies. We've picked them up when they've fallen down. We've seen their first steps. We've heard them say mama and dada growing up. But empathy is a really powerful tool. And I'd even say this, guys, maybe show empathy for the child who's portraying the bullying behaviors as well. As hard as that is, that's really hard if our child is at the expense of that behavior. But we also try to, if we can, provide empathy for that other child that's in this situation. And then lastly, the whole idea of unconditional positive regard, the whole idea of being non-judgmental, I think that's really hard as a parent, as an uncle, an aunt, a cousin. If you've got a familial relationship with someone, it's really hard. But that whole idea of being non-judgmental, bring that into certain conversations with your child. Sometimes we've got to put our arms around them, say, I love you, I'm proud of you, all of that sort of stuff. And then sometimes we can have that separation because this is a chance for our child to learn about something, about their behavior. And then lastly, everyone, God, I've waffled for 40 minutes here. This whole idea of self-care. Self-care is linked to self-worth. Self-worth is linked to an internal locus of evaluation and an internal locus of control. If we want our children to be resilient and have good self-esteem and to have good boundaries, we need to make sure we're doing that as well. I loathe a hypocrite. I loathe a hypocrite in all of this. We are still making mistakes in life. That's fine. That's not being hypocritical. But it's hypocritical if we don't do something about it. Okay, so I want you to look at this poster. It's my go-to poster. I want you to find something on there which you always do, and I want you to go and do it. I then want you to find something on there which you never really do. You would struggle to begin with, and then I want you to go and do that as well. Now, if exercise was the one that you don't go do a marathon. Just do an extra 5-10 minutes of of activity for the day. And if that's the logic, I only need to do an extra 5-10 minutes, something which is really gentle for exercise. Why don't you apply that somewhere else? And in fact, I'll give you a tip. Awareness of living life mindfully. I've got 2 tips. If you do this already, please forgive me. I want you to have dinner tonight with no technology on the table. No technology in front of us. We're not watching TV. We're going to sit at the table and we're going to eat as a family. If you do that already, great. And then the other one is this. I want you to go to sleep tonight and not have your phone in your room. If you are thinking, oh, but George, I need an alarm. Believe it or not, before phones, we had something called clocks, and we could put an alarm on there, can't we? But I want you to do something today so that when you talk to your children, you could be thinking, you know what, I'm not just talking the talk, I'm also walking the walk as well. Okay. So that's it from me, Liz. Obviously happy to answer any questions. I know someone might be thinking, what's that got to do with bullying directly? But as Liz said, this isn't a direct conversation. It's about contemplating different ways to approach this subject matter, because one way to tackle these things doesn't work. We have to have as many tools in our toolbox as possible and see what fits, see what works for the situation we're in. So that's it from me. Thank you. I'll stop sharing now.
Wow, thank you, George. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's totally multifaceted, this, isn't it? I mean, I've just been writing some notes as we go through. And, you know, thank you. Someone's commented, thank you for the new knowledge. Just to reflect this back, because obviously this is one of our skills we learn, you know, as a trainee counsellor. You've talked about building up self-esteem and the importance of that. And I think that's highly important and is probably our number one takeaway from this. Is this comes with years and months of preparation. This isn't an overnight fix, you know, and I think that starts, doesn't it, from today. Praise effort, and I think that's highly important. This is something we've tried to do as a family ourselves. Looking at reports, first thing you look at is effort. And you know, I teach psychology. We even teach the attends about Carol Dweck, growth mindset, effort, how to that. And again, there's loads of resources out there for parents, but it's really important. I think that is what we're saying to our children. It's not about, oh, you're so clever, or, you know, it's about the effort that they put in. Listen, what do you need from me? I think that was really important. I took that out of what you said. What do you need from me as a parent right now? Is it to listen or is it to act? And sometimes with bullying, you have to, as a parent, know which is the right thing to do. And if you're in any doubt, please reach out to us as a school. You know, we are here to help and support you. One of the questions we've had in actually is, what does school do to prevent and deal with bullying? Well, we talk about this openly. You know, we're not afraid of talking about this. We accept the fact that there will be incidences of unkindness, of bullying, and we try as a school to develop our ethos so that it is kind, that it is respectful. It's in line with the values of the leaders of this country. But also we put those support networks in there. You know, your first line of defense as a parent is your tutor, is your class teacher. You know, that's speak to them first of all. Let them know what's going on. Let them know what you might want from that. Whether it's awareness, whether it's you know, to move the child, to reignite other friendships, whatever that is. And we will listen as a school, and we will, you know, obviously give you and your child that autonomy as well. And I think that's really important when it comes to bullying. Is sometimes it's all right for us to know that things are going on. We will not take action, you know, unless it's in agreement with you and your child. There is a whole level of other support. The heads of year, you know, Mr. James, Miss Harper, Miss Barnes, you know, Miss O'Neill. There's a whole layer of pastoral support from a leadership point of view. And obviously there's us as well. There's myself, there's Tori, there's Maria, who can also be involved in this. So never feel like you are on your own dealing with these situations. I think that's really important. Talked about promoting empathy, George. Really important as well, isn't it? You know, is teaching empathy and showing empathy. You talked about the core conditions, talked about building this internal locus of control. And again, something we teach in psychology, but it's really resonated with me. as a parent about that. Boundaries, self-care. There is that elephant in the room, social media. We have to talk about it, technology. And if you look on our respect poem, mnemonic, whatever it is, acronym, technology should be a tool, not a weapon. And I think that, is something we've done talks on it in the past. We talked to the students about it. That book, The Anxious Generation, I've had a number of parents reach out to me. It's come to me through LinkedIn. It's come to me through our parent community. I know both of us have bought it, and it's something we're looking at. If as a parent, this is something that resonates with you, drop me an email. I'm going to have a meeting. I'm going to get some of our parents who've read this and who want to think of different ways of giving or not giving our children access to social media. Do they need smartphones in year 5 and 6? I think as a teenage mum as well, it's almost too late for our children who are 15, 16, 17, they've got them. But can we delay this? Is this something that we can look at? Because it is a huge, huge issue. And I know I haven't read the book yet, but I know the general takeaway from the book is that this has been one of the worst things that's happened to our children in terms of anxiety, mental health, and things like that. So in all of that, we do have a couple of questions, and I think a lot of them we may have answered already. One of them is, I was bullied as a child, and I'm scared the same thing is going to happen to my son. What more can I do to prevent it? And I think you did touch on that, George, already.
Yeah, so obviously it's never, like I said, we need to work. I hate the expression when people say it on the counsel courses, you need to work through your own issues first. That's not a very kind way to go about it. But the fact is, you've already acknowledged your own experience. Obviously, I received bullying growing up. So we do need to think about, okay, and how has that influenced me as an adult, into my adult life, as a human being, but as a parent? I will say this, and obviously as a therapist, of course, say this. If you feel it's having such an impact on you in terms of your worry for your own child, you do need to work on your own history and that experience itself, be it talking to a therapist, talking it through. As I said to you, I actually spoke to the people that were unkind to me, and I spoke to the people that I was unkind to, because I thought that was a part of my growth. But a big part of this as well is that we have to, it's really interesting. Parenting style 20, 30 years ago, when it came to how do you handle bullies, we often would say stand up to them, stand toe to toe, and all of that. And whilst I do agree with that in part, it's quite a roll your sleeves up, come on, stand. And when it means stand toe to toe, they mean physically stand up for yourself. Whereas now we would be saying, well, actually, no, stand up toe to toe emotionally, set your boundaries. So I'd be saying things like, educate our children about bullying. I think one of the best conversations I ever had as a child was with my mother. And what I didn't realize, Liz, and for this parent who was asking, is that my mum was actually teaching me empathy, because she was talking about not how people are worse off in the world to make me feel guilty, but we were talking about actually there's always a side to a story which we never knew. I would talk openly and frequently with my child. I would resist asking my child how was school, because what do most kids say? Fine. Or they just close off. So ask them, what 3 good things that happened at school today? Engage their response, things like that. Help the child be a positive role model. And how do we help that? By us being a positive role model. Boost their self-esteem, build up those preventative measures. And then I will say this, funny enough, Liz, you've mentioned about the phones and all of this. I would also say for our children, Liz and myself and all of us adults here, I actually did the math, and I was thinking, I was about to say, none of us grew up with social media, but actually I've met some Cranley parents, and I'm flattering myself here. Some of you are young enough to have grown up with it in when you were maybe mid-teens. Our bullying experience was only at school, or for me on the train or at the park. So, we had that protective layer at home. We knew that as soon as we got home, there was that safety there. My mum and dad, my 2 older sisters, Jenny and Faye, we were a collective group here. But for these children with the phone use, I would say to this parent as well, be part of the online experience. Be part of this with them. I do have my own opinions about technology. I'm with you, Liz, that it's a tool, not a weapon. I am a big believer of removing the tool now and then if it's becoming unhealthy, or monitoring it a bit better. But for these children, they need to learn about social media and technology. So let's be part of it with them, because you know what? We need to learn about it ourselves as well. Hopefully that, as you said, Liz, kind of already been answering it, but hopefully that will help. I will say then specifically our own experiences. I'm an adult, and it's really interesting because it doesn't matter what age adult client I work with, I'm working with the inner child. Liz knows this, and some of you have attended my training. I've got a client in her 80s. I'm working with the 7-year-old because the 7-year-old received such trauma. That's what I'm working with. So we've all got that child within us that needs that love, that care, that support, that empathy that we didn't perhaps receive at the time. So go do something about it.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm quite open. I've stood in assembly with the senior students and talked about, my experiences of being bullied. And I say to them, I'm just so relieved it was then, even though they did try to record me on a dictaphone and say bad things. It's about knowing your boundaries, knowing your values, isn't it? And I think, you're right, the parent, and I did want to acknowledge that parent reaching out as well. But it is about dealing with the feelings that you have around the experiences you had. And whether that's feelings of anger or shame or whatever it is, you need to deal with that so it doesn't then pass on to the way you react or overreact potentially to small situations. We have to teach our children the skills they need for life. We will come across bullies in the workplace. Our children will come across bullies in their future that we can't just go into school and deal with. And that's not me saying school won't deal with these things, but if we deal with them too quickly or deal with them for the child, depending on what the situation is. And again, every situation, from my experience, 20 years now working in pastoral care with children, every situation is different, and every situation needs a individualized response. And I think that's really, really important as well. Just another quick one. We are out of time already, but we had an email last night. How do we support our children through the challenges ahead in relation to AI, cyberbullying and doxing? I'm going to be honest, I had to Google one of them. I didn't even know what doxing was. I do now. And again, I think it comes back to, doesn't it, the same things we've talked about. AI is outside of our, I don't know, George, you're not an expert in this, I'm guessing.
So with AI, I mean, there's some fantastic speakers in the UAE, by the way. I mean, I know a couple of them, but in terms of AI, doxing I've always known about, but I never knew it was doxing until like a year. It was called doxing until like a year or so ago. I mean, if I could just put AI under cyberbullying and doxing, let's consider it's bullying. It is bullying, but it's cyberbullying. What steps would we take if it was face-to-face bullying? We'd contact the school, and we'd see if the school could have a dialogue. And then I'd be saying this, as I said earlier, be part of this online experience. It's such a simplification. I work with eating disorder clients, and sometimes a client has allergies to certain foods, and yet, sort of thing, or, we have these allergic responses to things. And I say, well, do we need to have a life where we have that in it and we have that dialogue? One of the best things I ever did, guys, was I removed, whilst we've got a Twitter or X Mind Your Health account, it's never used. One of the best things I ever did was I removed Twitter from my and emails from my phone, or the notifications for emails, because I realized it was impacting my life too much. Rather than us saying to this child, well, then we just have to remove it from your life, like, oh, you hit your, so this is a childhood experience. I used to hit my sisters with a toy sword growing up because I was the youngest brother. And what did my parents do? They'd snatch the sword out of my hand and say, you can't do that. It looks
like George is frozen. I don't know whether we are still live there. Rima, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like George has dropped his internet. I'm dying to know what he's going to say. Oh, I lost you then.
Yeah. So basically, I was basically saying, when I was a child, we didn't have phones. We would have toys, and I would have a toy sword, and I'd hit my sisters because I was the younger brother, and that's what you do when you're 3 or 4 years old. And my parents would snatch the sword out of my hand and say, right, you don't get to use the toy anymore until you learn how to use it properly. Yeah. I do think there is a scope there when it comes to this. However, if the child is using the phone appropriately and yet they're the ones receiving the bullying behavior, I don't think that's an appropriate way to be acting on that. So it's a chance for us, again, to sit down and have a dialogue with them and talk about appropriate and safe use. Because often when I work with young people and they've had these issues online of doxing and cyberbullying, and we've gone through it, I've pointed out to them, it seems to me that you've done everything your way, very mature, very balanced, and behaved really responsibly. It seems that all of this is on this other person's behavior. And it almost shocks the child or young person, because they feel as if because they've received this behavior online, they're the ones in trouble. And we're like, no, logically, no, you're fine. But because you have a dialogue with them and you work through it, that's the big thing for us as parents, because actually we don't know a lot of this stuff, and the kids sometimes do, or they think that they do. And as I said earlier, let's not focus on the event. Let's focus on the emotion and behavior around the event, because that's where the learning really happens for us.
Yeah. And I think, you know what, the technology, by the time, you know, my little boy is the same age as my daughter, it will have moved on. What doesn't move on is how to do, you know, the self-esteem, the boundaries. That's what we have to do as parents, because then no matter what challenges the children face, they're ready. Last question. It's about how to recognize signs of bullying in children. And I think, again, for me, it's going back to changes, any signs of mental health, you know, it's going back to that. Have you got anything, just final words? Just to say?
I always, it's such a cop out, but I would say change in behavior is just a change in behavior. They do start to, so first and foremost, as a counsellor, we say this, and it seems like it's not factual, but it is true. It's not scientific. We must trust our gut instinct and intuition as a parent. Teachers do it all the time. We have that what if mentality. Gauge if they're changing behavior. And then the other one is, remember, hurt people hurt people. And it's often the case that when someone is upset, they will try to project that pain and distress onto someone else, to maybe highlight someone else's distress as a signal to us parents saying, hey, notice me, mummy and daddy, I'm really upset about something. So that's the big thing, that change in behavior. But please trust your intuition as parents. It very rarely leads us astray, honestly. Yeah.
And yeah, it goes back to the unmet needs, doesn't it? If you're seeing displays of unkindness from your child to their siblings, what's going on that you know, they are projecting that onto someone else potentially, what is going on for them. But again, you know, we do have to end. If anyone has any questions, if anyone feels they need support with this, don't hesitate to reach out to us as a school. This is what we do. You know, your children have to be happy. They have to feel safe. We have a wellbeing survey coming up in the next 2 weeks. We'll be asking them, and one of the things we ask all of your children is, you know, do you feel safe in school? Do you have one person that you would speak to, that you can speak to, who you trust? And if, you know, the answer is no, then, you know, we talk to them. The head of year, the tutor will talk to them about what that looks like. So we do ask, you know, and I think it's really important that we continue to ask, we continue to look for signs, and we continue to be aware of what might be going on for in their lives. I think children will often try to, you know, test the water of telling you something to see how you react. So our reactions as parents and as teachers, as educators, are really important, you know, because it might not be actually what they are saying that matters. They might be trying to tell you something else that's going on. And I think, you know, when it comes to safeguarding and all of those things as well, it's important that you're calm and you respond, you know, from that position as well. So thank you, George. Once again, I've, you know, always learnt a lot from you. If there are any parents out there who do want to look at the anxious generation, who do want to have a conversation around that, I know I've got 2 parents already who want to, you know, come into school and have a chat around developing a sort of response or a parent group. Please do just drop me an email. It's just there in the call. All right, thank you to everyone else. Have a lovely rest of the term. We will be back before the end of the year with one more talk, but huge thank you, and don't hesitate to reach out to George. How can people contact you, George, if they want?
So they can definitely not social media. I'd say email is at george@mindyourhealthlimited.com, and the website Mind Your Health Limited will have my contact details as well.
And we will pop that into the newsletter on Friday as well, along with your slides. So thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening. And thank you to Rima in the background as well. They're fielding questions and being really supportive. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.